Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotion that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tira Wages, and I am here with clinical sexologist, marriage and family therapist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, the woman who ties everything together for us so we can understand it and apply it to our lives, Miss Phyllis Hill. We are so excited to be joining you today, and we are going to be talking about a topic that has affected my life for years, and now I think is affecting couples everywhere because we want to have a diagnosis. We want to have a label of what's happening to us, but oftentimes we're inaccurate of what we actually think that is.
Yeah.
So
Well, hello, world.
Hi,
We're excited to be here. And this is really, really significant. And especially talking about sexuality culturally, we just kind of don't do that. And so we leave people to drown. And especially from a faith-based perspective, people kind of think that's the way it should be. You just shouldn't talk about this. And we've been told so many times over the years that, well, if it gets bad enough, then go see a sex therapist. Of course, so many sex therapists, how do you know that they're going to present what's actually beneficial to you? I know technically they have a degree, but that doesn't mean that they actually know how to have healthy connection.
Wow. Yeah. So you kind of didn't say the topic.
I didn't.
No.
I was about to.
I'm
Sorry.
excited.
No,
No, but
I
I think that was great because I agree that oftentimes we don't talk about these things because culturally we don't think it's okay. And so what that is doing is leading to a society where we don't know how to function sexually within it. And so a part of that problem is what we are talking about today, and that is the low libido. The symptom, would it be a symptom? Yeah, I guess it's a symptom.
Typically,
And often an excuse to not live to our fullest extent sexually and not experience how we were designed and created for to come together with our partner.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to say an excuse because that kind of sounds active and intentional, but people just don't know.
Yeah.
And again, we have no conversation about it, so people are just kind of left on their own and they just drown, and it's an off-limit topic, which is bizarre to think, if your car was having problems and, whatever, it just wouldn't start in the morning and it takes you 15 minutes to get it started, it would be idiotic to go, well, I just don't feel comfortable talking to anybody about my car. And so you just leave it.
Wow.
And you go, well, we don't, in our culture, we don't talk about cars. We don't talk about problems with cars. That would be weird. That would be awkward. But that's the equivalent of what we're doing. And I would suggest this is far more significant in the human experience than your car is.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, even just saying the term low libido, I think it becomes, for a lot of us, we don't really even understand what that means scientifically, but we say it because we hear others say it, and it becomes that thing where, oh, I just have low libido,
Right.
and we don't even maybe know what that means, or just it's kind of like that label that we even put on ourselves, and that is part of what's happening.
Yeah.
So, babe, I think that would be a great place to start, just from a scientific definition, even to explain to our listeners, what does it really mean, or what is a low libido?
Yeah, low libido is a result of something else. It's a symptom. And a lot of times it helps us to take one situation out of it and put it into another so we can grasp it a little from a different angle. Because if someone said to you, oh, I have low hunger, and they just didn't eat, well, that's a symptom of something else. And, we label it in psychology, anorexia, but that's a symptom of something. It's not a cause in and of itself. That's the result. And if we could examine it that way and go, okay, so what's happening here? And even to not pathologize it, to not say to somebody, oh, well, you have something wrong with you. I guess technically you could argue that something's missing, yes, but I don't want to approach it that way. I just want to be able to say to people, oh, so help me get what's happening there, what happens for you. We talk a lot about pain points and joy points in every area of life, but certainly sexuality. A lot of times we'll label them brakes and accelerators. So a lot of times there's simply brakes that are happening that we don't realize are happening.
Wow.
So the psyche, just on purpose, I know for me, I deal with low hunger a lot. I just get exhausted by food. I'm overwhelmed by it. It's one of the few things I'm mad at God about is why in the world do we have to eat so often? It's ridiculous. And what's crazy is if you have a phenomenal meal I mean, it's just the best meal you've ever had. That should last you for a good number of days.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean,
I agree.
if it's a crappy meal, I get that. You're going to have to eat again soon. But if it's a great meal, you shouldn't have to eat for a while. And it doesn't work that way. So
Wow.
anyway,
That's such a good, I mean, I kind of love that you brought it into that arena. Because I know you and I are so different in that area where I finish a meal, I'm already thinking about my next meal. And, we go to a restaurant and then I'm like, oh, what next restaurant are we going to get to go to? Where you feel actually pain in having to think about food or, and it's, if anyone ever hangs out with us, especially in our home, Glenn is so funny walking in the kitchen and he'll say, babe, have you thought about what I should have for lunch? And I always go, no, like, I'm not going to think about what you should have for lunch. And, he's kidding and it's a banter, but there is underneath some of that, not a kidding. I think he would love it if I just put right in front of him, here is your lunch, eat that.
Yeah.
And, which we don't do that. But it's not a joy point for you, where for me, it's a huge joy point. But even that idea of, like, labeling and say, oh, well, he's a low hunger guy and I am a high hunger guy, like, just that terminology, everybody be like, what are you saying? No one says that. Yeah. And yet we can label ourselves like with, oh, I just have low libido and that's just too bad,
Right. I do think that often though, Glenn, and I know that you never want to put things on people, especially as a therapist, you are great about giving people the benefit of the doubt. So when I say the word excuse, you're like, oh no, that sounds intentional. I often think that it does become intentional. I can remember sitting with girlfriends just a few years into marriage, and the conversation was like, what animal are you in the bedroom? And I was a sleepy panda. Like, that's what I was. But in that moment, and this is not good, I'm not patting myself on the back for this by any means. I have shame in it. But that became my badge of honor of like, I'm the sleepy panda in the bedroom. And I just kind of wore it and became okay with it. And sorry, bud, this is who you married. This is what you got. And I have a low libido and this is where we're at. But I still didn't talk to other people about it. And when I did, it came off as kind of being this like funny, oh, this is cute, who you are thing, instead of, we need to work on this. This is not even normal.
But again, I would suggest that that's a result of something before that. And if we don't figure out the before that, because the point is, in that situation, we can say to Tira, you change your behavior right now. You do this differently, which is what the vast majority of marriage therapy, sex therapy does. It says you just have to do this differently.
Right.
Well, I want to find out what's leading to that.
Right.
Now, I was going to mention, just talking about hunger, I love food. I enjoy food so much once I'm into it.
I get that.
The problem is it's just overwhelming to me, the idea of going.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because that is true, that like when we go to a restaurant or, even when I cook, I mean, you love the food, but left on your own, it's that beforehand. It's the block of, you open the fridge and get so overwhelmed that you just close it right back. Yeah. And that's I think often, and I love that you even are bringing this in as an analogy with this. I think we label ourselves, right? And it's too overwhelming to think of doing anything about it. And so we just close the refrigerator back. It's like, I have low libido. Sorry, bud. Sleepy panda. That's who I am. That's who you married. So just keep that refrigerator closed.
Right.
But then, when you actually tap into it, you go, well, this is a pretty amazing thing.
Right.
And yet to stay there, or just to really kind of grow into that is where I think for some, it's a really, really long bridge.
Yeah.
There's a pretty big, divide. And for others, it's not quite as long of a bridge, to get there.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. And we didn't, I just think about our many years early relationship, you would not have been low libido, you would have been no libido.
Yeah.
But again, that's the result. So she learned to not only avoid me sexually, but to avoid me sexually. So, if she was in the kitchen doing something and I walked in behind her and touched her, well, she's anticipating me walking behind her. So she's moving away before I even do that, because we could be 3 steps 4 steps, 5 steps away from sexual activity. So, but again, that was the result. I mean, there were so many things happening for her. Number one, we had incredible wounding between us. Number two, initially, fellas didn't have orgasms for years.
Right.
Well, how in the world she was involved sexually at all, I don't even understand. It's amazing that we ever reproduced and made babies because there's nothing in it for her.
Right.
It's just, I mean, it's just, there was just no joy in it at all.
Yeah.
So I think admire you that you were involved sexually with me at all because there was no reason to, other than just out of either kindness or duty. I'm not, or both. I'm not sure. But again, that's not because she decided to not have a libido. Now, she then did decide some of her actions.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, I just want to go back, find out the cause, find out what's happening underneath all of it.
Right. Yeah. This topic this week, we're having it because we just finished our intensive this last weekend where 8 couples flew in from all over to spend 4 days just diving into their relationship. And this question came up about the libido, and it actually was asked by a man initially. And there kept being question after question about libido. We kind of stayed on this topic for a bit because several individuals were really wanting to know more about it. And it was in that conversation that it hit me that, because they kept asking about the hormones, they kept asking about getting older, does it go down? And there were all of these logistics involved with what inside your body causes low libido. And I know that that can play a part for some people, but you always say that that's a small percentage of people. It's not necessarily everyone that's experiencing this symptom of low libido. And in listening to them talk, it hit me that really what I view now a low libido to be is a specific emotion or a set of emotions that people are feeling that are keeping them from emotionally and mentally desiring sex. Because that's what we know the libido to be, is the desire for sex. Well, for me, I experienced such shame and fear sexually that my brain was saying, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Well, guess what? That means my body is not desiring to engage sexually. It had nothing to do with my hormones. It had nothing to do with my chemical makeup. It was 100% the emotion that I had when I thought about sex, blocking my desire.
But then it does become hormonal. It does become chemical and biochemical because, for example, as you said, you have fear. Well, fear has an effect on the body. And so if you're experiencing fear, that does change your blood chemistry. That changes what's happening. And again, that's my whole issue, is that then at the end of it, we go, oh, she has a low libido. And we pathologize a human. We label her. She's like, oh, well, she's one of those low libido women. Well, okay, fine. That's the result. But there's a bunch of stuff that led up to that. And we want to examine that to find out what's happening for you.
Right. So one of the things that I would really like to do, and again, we don't have someone specific in front of us. We're not talking to someone today who's saying that they're experiencing this. So we can't necessarily narrow that down for a person. But for our listeners that may be struggling with, they're like, I'm somebody who would classify myself as having low libido. I would love to talk about what some of those underlying emotions could be for people where they could identify that. And so I was thinking about a man, because it was initially a man who asked the question.
Right.
And, I think 2 things for men. One, because he was specifically asking as you get older. And so I think there's a performance fear that people have as they get older of, am I actually going to last as long as I should? And all of this fear then comes in, or shame that could be blocking them from desiring it. I also think about loneliness. Like I think about, for Wes, he experienced such sexual loneliness for so long because he was engaging with someone, but they weren't mentally and emotionally there.
Wow.
And so over time, that loneliness of saying, I'm not good enough for you, that began to block him, there towards the end until things really started changing for us. And so I would love to think of what those different items could be for people so they could identify even within themselves as they ask themselves this question.
Yeah, that is so good. And I love that you're starting off with just saying that, this was a man who asked the question.
Right.
And we do. I mean, we talk to couples where the man is like, I'm really struggling in this. And, I know that we call it, we've labeled that even. And then we have, I think the little blue pill, is that what we say?
Right.
It's like, oh, we've got a pill that can help.
Right.
And yeah, it can help, but what's under that caused that? And I love that you were even just mentioning for you and Wes, just, eventually it's almost kind of like your body starts to protect yourself and go, buddy, this has been so painful and there's been so much rejection
Right.
and loneliness in it. Your body as a protection just kind of starts to shut it all down more and more. And, when you break into the emotional side of it, and of course, that's why for us, with couples, we go, you got to have that deep emotional connection
Right.
to lead you to incredibly dynamic sexual connection.
Right.
And a lot of couples have wounded each other. And what's fascinating to us, it's not something that happens over decades. It can happen so quickly.
Right.
And I know that's part of our story, is it happened on our honeymoon. Like we went into our honeymoon thinking this was just going to be beyond anything spiritually, emotionally, physically that we've ever had. And we didn't know what we were doing. And it for me, it was such a disappointment, and there was instant pain, and both physically, but also emotionally, because I was so disappointed. I really thought that I just had this, we've done everything right. And so this is going to be, incredible. Oh,
And there was an absolute lack of joy. There was
yeah,
no pleasure experience
Yeah.
for you in that.
right. Yeah. And so, it was very quickly that I you labeled myself as just broken. I'm just one of those,
Well,
women on the planet that's broken.
Right.
But I also didn't talk to anyone, so I felt very alone in it. And so it just very quickly went into a very dark, scary place. And that was only within a few days, weeks of being married.
Yeah.
And so for those listening, and often when we tell our story, people go, oh, I can relate so much to that. And it doesn't matter how long you've been with this partner, it's like, and so just to realize that emotional affects the physical so much.
yeah.
Right.
And again, we would, in that scenario, on our honeymoon, we said, oh, she's one of those low libido or no libido women.
Yeah.
Well, no, number one, there's emotional wounding between us already. Number two, there's no joy in this for her at all. There's no pleasure at all. So what would prompt her to want to do this activity again? And I can remember very clearly, I'd be like, hey, babe, you want to go do that thing? She's like, no, but I do want to go water skiing. We did a lot of water skiing on our honeymoon. I didn't know I'd married a water skiaholic. But she knew, I mean, number one, we enjoyed water skiing. But number two, she knew if we're water skiing, we're on a boat with other people, and there's not going to be any of that sex stuff happening. So, but again, that has nothing to do with low libido. Although you could say, yes, she had low libido, no libido. Well, yeah, but there's something pushing that. And it took us years. We were the slow kids in the group to figure that out.
Well, it's interesting, even thinking back to that time, and we've heard this from other young couples who were pretty close to after the honeymoon, where one of them will say, she, if it's a guy, she lied to
She
me.
tricked me.
She
Yeah.
tricked me.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we used to make out before we were married, she was all into it. And now she doesn't want me to touch her.
Right.
And it's like, oh, and we've heard that so often. And I know that for us, there was who needs to make out? Now we can just have
Right.
intercourse. Like, let's just skip all the making out. Let's just go right for the intercourse. Well, for me, that was devastating. Like, I had no time to even show up. Like, my body wasn't just that instant in a response.
Right.
And again, I think we call that, or we label that as, well, that's just because you have low libido.
Right.
Instead of realizing, no, it takes me a minute. Like, I need a little time, which is why making out was such a positive experience for me, because it was so sensual. And, even though we had limited where we went with it, we didn't have intercourse before we were married, but it was like that, it was still such a positive. And even on our wedding night, we didn't make out at all. Like, it was like, we can finally do it. And And of course, never knowing that's not going to go well if that's how you approach it. And
Right.
so there was just such instant disappointment in that.
Yeah. And I don't know if I ever used that phrase, but I very much felt tricked. Very much felt lied to, that what the heck happened? Because when we were dating, you were so passionate, and I'm a better than average kisser. So
Well,
just
true.
in all fairness,
Sure.
there, just I don't want to put people off with that. But and then we're married, and it's like she doesn't want to be intimate with me at all, any way.
Right.
And again, because she then figured out, oh well, if we are kissing, well, that's going to lead to that sex thing. But again, it's not because she has a low libido, and she actually does have a low libido, but it's what happened before that pushed that scenario. And we just always have to go back to that. Again, that's the power of the three phrases to go, ooh, what happens for you there? What am I missing? Help me get that, which is so powerful to this day for us, because we've been at this for a while. And for me to be able to ask her literally in the moment to go, oh, babe, what's happening for you? Because in that moment, she could look like a low libido person. Well, she's just thinking about an email that she got that now it's a big issue we have to deal with the connection codes business side. But that has nothing to do with quote unquote low libido. That's where her mind is. She's feeling pain. She's feeling fear about that email. It doesn't necessarily have to do with me at all. Now, if I've been rude to her, if I've been unkind, well, that's going to be a factor too, which will affect her quote unquote libido. I don't even like the term libido. I mean, I get it culturally. We call it that.
Yeah.
But it's actually just what's happening for her in the moment. And if she doesn't feel emotionally connected with me, she doesn't feel emotionally safe with me in the moment, it's going to be really difficult for her to engage on a much deeper, more vulnerable level, which is sexual involvement.
Right.
There's so many layers to this, because even culturally, we have been, and movies are probably some of the worst, where you watch a movie and it all flows so naturally. And it's like, oh, that's how it should be with us. Like I should walk in the room and immediately, the music starts, the candles are lit, the smell is amazing, which I know in movies you don't smell, but you almost get that impression like you can, and then it's not, there's not an awkwardness. There's just like, oh my word. And, we go to the movies a lot, and it's funny how, I can't even watch trailers during certain movies, especially if they're horror movies. So I'm not looking, Glenn will like, don't look like. And so, but the music alone, I'm jumping and I'm not even watching, but it's the music, how that affects us so much. And so you think about movies that are rom-coms, romantic comedies, it's like that moment when that scene starts, the music is pulling you in. Yeah. And so you think it's just a natural response from two people. And then you realize, and some of us don't ever realize, that there's so many staging. They're staging the whole thing. And then we are so disappointed in our own encounter because it's like, what happened? I walked in the room and you didn't just melt, and it's like, we also start to assume things like, I just don't turn you on. And then you hear that enough and the other then goes, I guess you're right. I guess you don't turn me on. And then we start to just label, which is of course low libido. Yeah. That's just a label instead of finding out what's actually happening. And one of the tools that we have is the core emotion wheel. And we encourage couples that know how to use the wheel and that already have an understanding of being emotionally connected. We say, use the wheel before you have, playtime sexually. And some people are like, really? That just seems unromantic, right? Because now they've labeled it romantic, unromantic. And it's like, but to be emotionally connected before you're physically connected is such a cool thing. And then, because you just mentioned a minute ago, if maybe even earlier in the day, there was rudeness spoken, there was hurt in it, but that hasn't been processed yet.
Right.
Well, that goes into the time together. Like that goes into, there's definitely a hurt that then is a blocking. And you mentioned earlier the brakes and accelerators, which if you're not familiar with that, we break that down more in our late night masterclass. But really, to identify for yourself, what are my brakes and what are my accelerators? And we can be very different in our brakes and our accelerators,
Right.
which is a huge thought process. And even in your brakes and accelerators, to realize I am influenced by society. Like society says, I should have, like whatever, lingerie should be an accelerator. But to be honest, it's not at all. And so then we judge ourselves and we think we have to put that in the category of accelerator. But really for us or for me, it may be a brake. And to say, no, you are allowed to find your own brakes and accelerators, and they may be very different than your partner, and to realize that's okay. But to communicate that is so huge. Don't assume things about each other.
Right.
Don't assume that that particular, whatever, like even with movies, you may go, oh, having candles on is an accelerator. Well, it may not be for your partner. It may actually bring you back to grandma's house or something. Like, don't assume that just because in a movie it seems like that.
Right. I love that you also were talking just about how if the hurt that we could bring, and that could decrease your desire. And because I think about, I was having fear or shame specifically with the bedroom, or loneliness specifically with the bedroom, but the things that we are doing outside of our bedroom, the way we talk to each other throughout the day, the way that we are fighting style, are we yelling at each other a lot? Well, guess what? It's probably not going to increase your desire sexually on a regular basis for sure. And then talking about the way we look going into the bedroom, I think about women that have just had babies. I can remember having babies, and one, there's the fear right after of like, oh my gosh, you want me to have sex with you like 6 weeks? I can remember going to the doctor's office and just praying. He'd be like, no, it's not time yet. And he did the first time. He was like, it's not time. Yeah, 6 more weeks of winter, go back into hibernation. And because there's so much fear physically that we would then mask as low libido, but then also the shame that I felt of presenting myself before my husband. Does he view me the same after childbirth? All of those things that can present as low libido. And so I love the thought of doing the wheel before sex, the core emotion wheel. I was saying it weird this week, and now I'm insecure about it. Before, because then you can just process that out. If Wes had heard me say, I feel shame about the way that my body is looking right now after having that baby, I am sure he would have turned that around and made me feel like $1,000. But we don't process that with each other. We don't tell each other the fear or the loneliness or what those emotions are. And so we just continue to stay emotionally unprocessed, which I view as leading to a block at some point that will decrease the desire for sex. And then next thing you know, you're saying, I have low libido. But it starts back at that beginning point.
Which again, we know that was pre-connection codes for you and Wes as well. But if you had the core emotion wheel, just to find out what's happening, and for Wes to be able to be present with you and find out, hey, babe, what's happening for you here? Those 3 phrases. What am I missing? Catch me up on what's happening for you. And just a side note, but I just think it's important that men especially recognize that what the woman contributes to childbirth is, the man contributed about half a teaspoon and he enjoyed doing it. And then he's done. And I don't care if he's the greatest dad ever, even being present after the birth, there's no comparison. What the woman does, it wrecks her body. And I always say that they're adorable, but they're parasites. These babies are sucking up resources from the mom's body, not the dad's. And then after birth, if she's breastfeeding, all the more. And there's just something, and I'm not willing to argue all the biology of it, but moms just do more. They just do. And again, I don't care if it's the greatest dad ever. The mom there's just something there. So it's just totally, both certainly during the 9 months of pregnancy, but afterwards, what the female contributes is ridiculous compared to what the male does.
And thinking about the emotion for me with that as well, as far as sexually, I can vividly remember us leaving a restaurant, and our oldest was probably a few weeks old, and me looking at the clock and it said 8 p.m.
Mm.
and I felt fear wash over my body.
Wow.
And every night around 8 p.m., I would become so afraid because I
Mm.
didn't know what that night held.
Wow.
And so, yeah, my libido was low if Wes was trying to have sex with me at
Right.
8:30
Yeah.
because my fear of how many hours am I going to be up tonight? I have no idea.
Mm.
And I can just remember the intensity of that fear hitting me
Yeah.
every single night. And so, therefore, it looked like, oh, I have low libido because I'm breastfeeding.
Right.
You know, they say breastfeeding moms tend to have low libido. Well, it's actually a lot of fear, a lot of exhaustion, which leads to a lot of
Right.
emotion.
Just say a lot of other factors. And again, simultaneously, the man's like, what? My penis is just doing great. It hasn't been affected by this childbirth thing at all.
Right.
Well, the female, she just got wrecked in so many ways. I mean, just carrying another human inside you for 9 months, which I've never personally done, but that's intense. I've been around a bunch of people that have, and that's a lot. I mean, there's just a whole different experience. And the male's over here going, what? Babe, it's not, everything's great. And my penis is fine. And the female's experience is very different.
Yeah. Before we go to the core emotion wheel to do together, I want to spend the last few minutes of talking. A part of the conversation this weekend was with a few of the couples that were over the age of 50 and the fear that their libido was going to drop after the age of 50. And you talked about the study that came out before you turn 30 of how much a man's libido drops after he turns 30. And so I just want to spend a few minutes for our listeners that are like, I'm past the baby stage. I've done that. I have new fears now, or I have new, anger even about what's coming. And can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. Well, one quick side note before that, we did research years ago where, because, erectile dysfunction, all that is a billion-dollar industry now in our country where we're just giving guys pills, say, here you go, this will get you an erection for whatever, 3 hours, 4 hours. And we did some research where, we'd have a guy have an erection and then we'd slam a door, not on the erection itself, but behind him. And it was amazing watching that these guys would lose an erection literally sometimes in 1 second.
Yeah.
So we would then say, oh, look at that. He has erectile dysfunction. Well, sort of, but no, he got flooded with fear. We say intense emotion shuts down cognition. Well, cognition is involved in making all the sex stuff work. So now he's flooded with fear, so his body is not going to be able to maintain it. And even what maintains an erection for a guy is so incredibly delicate. It's very, very fascinating. We won't take the time to go into all that, but it's amazing how the human anatomy works in that regard. So again, we could quickly label and go, oh, look at that. He has low libido. Well, sort of. I mean, that's the result, but something else happened before that to change it. So again, a lot of guys are living in fear in their interpersonal relationship with their partner. So yeah, it's very difficult for them to get and maintain an erection, but again, it's not because of low libido. So the study, and this is it may have been the very first, I don't remember, it was one of the very first studies that I studied. And that's a lot of what I do is I research the research, because research with humans is very, very sketchy, always, because humans are so complex. Every human is unique. Chemists, I have a few chemist friends, and I always make fun of them because I'm like, you guys are the laziest scientists around, because they do research one time and then they know, well, if you put this with this, you get this. If you put 2 particles of hydrogen with 1 particle of oxygen, you don't have to run that research over and over and over again, because you're always going to get H2O. You're always going to get water forever and ever. You're never going to get cotton candy or a new car, which kind of be cool, but you're not going to. So humans is not like that. You have to run the research over and over and over again. So if it was in fact the very first study that I studied, this is long before I went to get these various degrees and certifications and such. But so the study said that men peak sexually in their late teens to early 20s, and then it's a steady drop off the rest of their lives, pretty much a straight line graph. And females peak sexually in their 30s, and then they plateau out, and then it stays consistent or constant after that. So, I just happened to read this, like, okay, whatever. So then we marry. I'm 20 years old. She's 19.
Right.
And then I'm 22 and 24, 25, and our sexual relationship is so difficult, so painful continuously. And now I'm in my late 20s, I'm 30, I'm early 30s. And I can remember longing for my libido, quote unquote, to drop off. And then I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? I'm as horny as ever. Now, I'm not connected with her sexually, and I wasn't out having an affair, but I've still felt that urge, that craving. So I'm like, okay, any day now. I'm 32 now. I'm 33, 34. So then I start asking my peers, I'm like, so how did that happen for you when your sex drive dropped off? And they're like, what? My sex drive is as high as ever. I'm like, wait, you're past 30. This can't be true. The research is pretty clear that you peaked in your early 20s. And they're like, no, I didn't. So again, that's when I started studying the study to go, wait a minute, the research was very emphatic that was true. And that research is still quoted to this day, even though it's completely jaundiced, completely debunked. It's terrible research, because what the research did was examined results. And so what happens is, if I was one of those test subjects, you would ask me, how often do you initiate sex with your wife? Well, early on, it was a lot. And again, I got rejected over and over again. So I start initiating less and less and less. Well, there you go. The data's clear. So Glenn's sex drive has diminished greatly. And by the time he's 30, he doesn't even ask anymore. He doesn't even initiate. He gave up a long time ago. Well, no, that doesn't mean that that's what I'm experiencing internally. That's just examining the results as far as what's happening. Simultaneously, for the female, if in fact they have babies, so she has these babies which wreck her body and wreck her in so many different ways. And now she's busy with these babies, trying to keep these humans alive. So she's distracted. And again, even if they're connected relationally, she's distracted. I mean, these babies take a lot to keep alive. Back to the food thing. You may have noticed this.
Yeah,
you feed them perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like an hour.
They want more.
And they want more food. And you're like, no, give me a week.
Yeah.
I fed you. It was the best meal you've ever eaten in your life. I'll feed you again in a week. Just doesn't work that way. So anyway, these babies are nonstop. So she's just busy. She's distracted. And again, that's even without deep wounding, which the vast majority of couples are experiencing all this wounding as well. Yeah. So now these babies get a little bit older, a little bit more independent. They're not as clingy, grabby, high maintenance. So now she's into her early to mid 30s. And then she realizes she and her husband have totally lost each other.
Right.
They have no connection at all. And then she knows, well, if I take my shirt off, it gets his attention. If I initiate something sexually, that always gets his attention. So then she begins initiating. Well, again, if you just did Tira as a test subject, then we go, oh, well, now her libido is increasing. And I'm not saying necessarily you and Wes, but for so many couples, what's actually happening is she's getting desperate because he works, 95 hours a week now, and then he plays golf with his buddies all the time. So she's just trying to get his attention.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to stop because I wouldn't say that she's getting desperate. That could be a part of it, but also she's experiencing freedom for the first time in years.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a huge part of it is now they're not having the fear of 8 o'clock at night, what's about to happen, or someone is sucking on me all day. So don't even touch my boobs because somebody else is. So I think that it comes in two parts. She's finally getting that freedom to where she's like, I'm back. Are you ready for me? Yeah. And he's like, dude, you've been gone a long time.
Yeah. And he gave up years ago.
Exactly.
And he experienced so much wounding in that. So now we hear this all the time. Now she's in her mid 30s. She initiates and he's like, nah, because she's become a pain source. And again, I'm not blaming her. I'm not pathologizing, indicting her, but he has experienced so much wounding that he's like, no, I don't really want to do that. So, but again, we were examining the results. I say we as a culture, as opposed to going, wait, what was happening there? And again, every human is unique. So every woman is unique. Every couple is unique. And I'm not saying that it's intentional at all. I'm just saying that's how it played out for people so often.
Well, I'm glad you just said it's not intentional. And, the child rearing, childbirth, carrying a baby it's magical. I mean, but it's like, okay, so how do we not lose each other during that season?
Oh yeah.
It is real. I mean, the lack of sleep is real.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
body being wrecked by childbirth is real. And it's the, how do you find yourself again?
Right.
How do you stay connected? And part of it is, even just our drive to get the tools of the connection codes to the world is so that you can emotionally share with each other what's happening.
Yeah.
And, to be able to say, I'm sexually lonely, and for your spouse to make space for that, for your, like, if it's like, of course you're sexually lonely. And even I always thought it was really interesting, like the doctor, the whole, you got to wait 6 weeks. And I think for so many women, it was like, oh, I've gotten permission,
Right.
Yeah.
right? I get to take a break and I don't have to worry about this. And to almost like not even be able to talk about that in what, okay, you're sexually lonely. And which, most people don't even have that terminology at all. But to kind of realize, wow, even hearing that, sometimes I would hear like, it's your fault, I'm lonely. And so that's part of the beauty of the connection codes, is just make space for what the other person is experiencing. I don't hear that as an indictment. I just go, oh, I get that. I get that you're lonely. And that doesn't mean I have to do anything different in the moment. That doesn't mean I have to go, oh, well, then right now, let's have sex because I don't want you to be sexually lonely. It's just like, oh, that's what you're experiencing. And, there is a season. I think when you have babies, that is a season of exhaustion for most women. And, it is a time of being able to strengthen the emotional connection, makes that time like you're in triage together.
Yeah.
Like you're in the trenches together. You've got to survive this season together.
Right.
You don't have to lose each other in that season.
It also, because you talked about what to do during that time frame, and I think about that all the time with me, because I was one of those women that we had sex sometimes, but he was just desperate for it a lot of times, and not because he's a broken person, but just because he wanted to connect with me. But I think, oh gosh, would I have had anything else to give him? Would I, because I have a 3-year-old, so I'm not that far out from it where I can remember. Right. And I don't know that I would have had anything else to give him. But what I think could have changed it was if I had been educated on sex beforehand. If before we had the babies, I knew how to orgasm. I knew what my body wanted, what my body needed. Right. So therefore, when we were coming together sexually after babies, there was something in it for me. And we were able to get there without all the extra frustration. I think that would have made a difference.
Yeah. But I would diverge even the mentality to say, do I have anything to give him? I don't want you giving him here. If he knew how to take care of you, and this is one of our protocols with late night with the connection codes, is just that sex is designed as a party for the female and the male is invited. So if Wes had known, well, I'm just going to take care of her, and we missed on a ton of things, but it's probably been a quarter of a century now that we figured out, okay, Phyllis has to have time to transition from being a mother to a lover. And it doesn't make any sense for me and it made sense to me at the time, but it absolutely doesn't. For me to think, okay, she was a mother, she was being pulled on, literally sucked on, literally giving her body to these babies 10 minutes ago, and now I want her to magically shift into being a wild, crazy lover. That's just not the human, that doesn't work that way. And so we figured out, okay, well, let's give her a transition time. And we actually built an addition onto our house when we lived in South Carolina, and I put a jacuzzi in the bathroom so that she had that time to transition. And I put all the kids to bed, and she would have at least 30 minutes, a lot of times an hour or more, to not be a mom, to not be engaging in that way. And it was such an incredible transition for her, where she could read a magazine that had nothing to do with parenting. This is back when it first became legal in God's eyes for us to have alcohol. So she would drink a wine cooler. Dun, dun, dun. That was like a big thing for us to have a wine cooler. But it gave her the opportunity to shift.
Yeah.
We've gone back into talking about so that time frame. But did we answer the question about those who are older?
Right.
Because you were supposed to break down kind of that study.
Right.
And so can you get back to that as far
Right.
as just what we've really found out, that is even the study that is actually a lot of people quote that
absolutely.
study.
Right.
Well, there are two couples that are the intensive this past weekend that said, we still believe that study. We've heard that recently, and we've always operated. And I think both of the couples were 50, 60, something like that. So, for me, so now I'm in my mid-30s, and I can remember, it's a horrible thing, a lot of listeners will judge me in this, but I can remember throwing that in your face, saying to you, I can't wait until my libido disappears, my sex drive goes away, and yours peaks, and I'm just going to sit there with folded arms and go, no, not interested. And I was so wounded, again, I'm not saying it's right, but I was so wounded that I couldn't wait to inflict that pain back on you. So, then I'm 35, late 30s, and I'm just like, dang, this is ridiculous. Something's wrong with me. And I can remember feeling so overwhelmed, crying out to God to please heal me of this, that this wrongness, his brokenness, his bad characteristic of mine. And now to realize, oh, no, actually the sex drive can be consistent throughout the lifespan.
Right.
We've never sat with a couple in their 90s. We've sat with a few couples in their 80s, quite a few in their 70s, and then it increases each decade down. No, I can't run as fast as I did whenever I was 18, but I'm more sexually connected with you now than I've ever been.
Right.
And we have amazing, wonderful, wild, kinky sex, far better than we did just 10 years ago, certainly far more so than 20 and 30 years ago. So we now know that that's true. But again, we're looking at the results all the time going, oh, well, these two are so wounded with each other, but we don't consider that, as far as scientifically looking at the research. But these two have been so wounded by each other. They've never processed through the pain. They've never processed through the wounding, which is often traumatic. It's a trauma experience. So now they're not interested in each other at all. And so we go, oh, okay, well, they're in their late 40s. So yeah, they're past that stage of their life. And we don't consider that. No, there's a cause and effect here. This has nothing to do with quote unquote low libido.
So as far as our listeners today, maybe we could each say one takeaway from what we're talking about, because some people go, okay, where do I start? We're so far gone in this, and we've been labeling each other with low libido forever. So where do you start? What is, maybe each one of us could give one thing that would be a takeaway.
Yeah, for me, it is really getting down to the core of that, what emotion it is. When you think about having sex with your partner, what hits you? What emotion is that? And then breaking that down. And so if you say hurt, what's the hurt? That's always the next question. Or that's my key takeaway.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just, I would say the same thing, but other step is be curious. Don't label yourself and leave it there. Be curious.
Yeah.
Be educated. Get better tools to know each other sexually, and just kind of, I think we just stop talking about it because we wound each other so much, and we don't talk to anyone else, and we don't know where's a good book to read. We don't know where's, and we get that. We get that there's actually a lot of stuff out there that doesn't help you. And so to be curious, lean into the emotion, break it down. And of course, we would encourage you to do our master class on sex to really take it from the myth to the truth.
Right.
Yeah. And my answer is basically the same, so it's repetitive, but to actually ask what's happening. I do that with you. I'm like, hey, babe, what's happening for you? Because again, if she's distracted, she's not going to be sexually engaged.
Right.
Not because she's bad, not because she's wrong, not because she's evil, not because she's not a good wife, good lover, and not because she has a quote unquote low libido. It's because something's happening with her. So I'm always following your energy to find out what's happening for you. I did want to mention real quickly, just because you referenced that as far as me conveying to you my sexual loneliness, and is an area of research I want to do in the next couple of years, how incredibly sexually connecting that is. And I didn't know that. I mean, it's the last 2-3 years that we've gotten good at that. And that, just doing that is sexually connecting. And you would think that we just had an amazing sexual interaction, and we didn't. I just feel so seen and heard by you.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't actually do anything any sexual activity, but it's sexually bonding.
Right.
Just the fact that I got to process the sexual loneliness, the sexual joy, whatever it is. And I hear that from other couples, that is connecting, sexually connecting, just that, even though they didn't actually have any sexual activity,
Wow.
which is
So
very
good.
fascinating.
So we should do the wheel.
Yeah.
Should we do the issue-specific wheel or just...
Well, I was thinking just do an issue-specific wheel about whatever, the first 10 years of our sexual relationship or lack of such.
Or current?
Okay.
I think
Okay.
current.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm already my brain is already going, so I'll start.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think the realization so I do feel guilt and shame
Mm.
that I pack our schedule so full.
Wow.
Our team even this week said you have to learn to say no. I realize I don't know how
Right.
to do that, so I feel guilt and shame about that.
Mm.
And in that, I feel fear of hurting you in that arena, because the more I pack our schedule, then there's not time to have really extensive
Wow.
playtime. So I think my sadness in it is just the realization I've missed on this. I've set this up. Even just last week, this week, next week, it's just crazy packed. So I feel loneliness, I think, in this arena at times because of missing in that with each other, and it's interesting because it goes back to how I control our schedule so much, but the loneliness of not having that playtime
Right.
with you,
Yeah.
just the extended playtime with you, so that my body gets engaged and shows up. Let's see, which one am I missing?
Not sure.
Okay, I feel anger, anger that we as a society can't talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
And I just, in my lifetime, I want to see this changed.
Yeah.
You know, we so comfortably talk about sports. It's like, wow, even when we can tease each other because we like opposing teams, we still talk about it. So I want sex to be something that can be talked about in a healthy way, where we can really help each other in it. The joy, definitely, I'm thinking already we are going away soon. And so I'm excited for that, because we always slow down when we go away and are able to tune into each other. So excited for that.
Cool. Yeah, for me, just so much joy sexually. Our relationship has evolved insanely. If you had told us 20, 30, 40 years ago what we would look like sexually today, we'd have been like, no, that's not us.
Right.
Because we're pretty out there. And just that we have the freedom to do that. I mean, there's just so much joy. And it amazes me that we've recovered, we've repaired.
Yeah.
Because again, we were not there for each other sexually for so very long.
Yeah.
And still shame in that. Shame that I'm 60 years old and still horny, and I should have been over this, whatever that math is, 35 years ago. So any day now, my sex drive is just going to plummet and disappear. So I do feel shame in that sometimes, just that, literally you get out of the shower and I'm like, oh, I think she's coming on to me sexually. She obviously is, because she's naked. So I'm just saying. Some guilt in that, just not tuning into you enough. Like you say, our schedule just gets crazy, and I end up kind of functioning as a victim to the schedule. Not thinking, wait a minute, dang it, I'm a human too. I'm in on this, and I need to be able to verbalize and just say the voice, because I love what we're getting to do. So it's not that I'm even bothered by the packed schedule. I love it, but I need to be more aware, tune in to you. Fear, gracious, fear. That's bizarre. I can't think of any fear as far as our sexual relationship now. I guess occasionally fear. We have a precious family that just started staying with us, and I guess I feel a little bit of fear and they've got adorable little kids. And so a little bit of fear that, oh, great, shoot, now we're set up again where we have people in our home. the pains, hurt, sad, and lonely. I don't experience a whole lot of that anymore. When we're busy, but it's just a fleeting thing. The sexual loneliness. Where I'm like, dang, we've been crazy busy for a bunch of days here. Sadness, just that we missed this for so long. We heard that from several couples this past weekend. It was just so sad that they said, we're whatever, 55, we're 60, we're 65. And we've missed decades and decades. And to think about that for us, and of course I abuse our young couples sometimes. I'm like, you piss me off because you're going to get to live what we didn't get to live. We missed so much. And even that, just the missing, but also the wounding that we were experiencing in the meantime. Hurt, oh gracious, I can't think of any hurt either. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Feels weird. I'm always right on tune with the core emotions. And the anger, the same. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, people, come on. And it's just fascinating because we say, oh, we had a sexual revolution in the 60s. I'm just not sure we did. We had sexual rebellion, which led us to sexual anarchy. But I don't know that we're any better off now than we were, in the 50s, 60s, whatever, because people still don't know how to have dynamic sexual connection.
Wow. So good.
I thought you'd say fear that you're going to break a limb at some point in your wild sexual encounters.
I don't feel any fear about it. I've said for years I'm going to die being involved sexually with her because she almost kills me so often. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear you say, because it does. No, honestly, it gives so much hope to couples. First, to hear of how things started in your relationship, and now to hear where you're at, where Phyllis, you're about to turn 60, Glenn, you're 60, and y'all are just getting started, and every time y'all come in and you're like, man, she blew me away this week. Like, my mind is blown. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so much that we get to unpack with each other and share with each other. And it's something that only we get to do with each other. And I think that is the most beautiful part. And so y'all just give all of the hope to everybody, no matter where you're at in your relationship.
If I have a tombstone, I guess it'd be great to say she killed him, parentheses, sexually.
Oh my word. We're not going to do that.
That'd be awesome. People read that creates some questions like, wait, what?
His head exploded.
Wow. Wow.
He had an aneurysm. It was too much.
It was too much.
Wow.
Well,
she found his limit.
Oh man.
That was it.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, I look forward to experiencing this more for myself. What a great way to go out one day. Yeah. And so thank you for all of our listeners who joined us today. I'm not going to say I hope. I know there was something in this podcast that resonates. Yes. Now we're going to be nervous to say that word. Resonates wherever you're at on your journey. If you are just starting in marriage and trying to figure this out, or you just had your babies, or you're past this stage, you are now in the grandkid stage and you are trying to re-find each other. This podcast is so impactful to give hope of where you can go. And if you're thinking, I need resources, I actually need help on this journey because we are so far away from each other emotionally and sexually, our masterclasses are the best place to start. In fact, we have one that includes our foundations class and our late night in one bundle together. So it just gets everything that you need. And you can find that at connectioncodes.co/late night. Please share this episode with your friends. And don't forget that you can watch on YouTube. Glenn, do you want to close?
So with so much of this, especially sexually, you need this.
You deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.